Futurologists predict that Earth's future might bring the fall of a giant meteorite, a nuclear disaster, and new deadly epidemics. At least one of these events may affect the generation that'll be born in the 2050s. Scientists predict that in about 100 years, an asteroid called Apophis could fall on Earth. It was discovered in 2004 and immediately made astronomers anxious. You see, the mass of Apophis is 61 million tons. It reaches 340 meters in diameter, which is just 30 times less than the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. Apophis is hurtling at 30 kilometers per second. The blow of such an asteroid could release 800 megatons of energy. Just compare that with the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima, which released 15/100ths of a megaton of energy. This means that if Apophis falls, say on New York City or any other major city, it'll literally raze it to the ground. The blast wave will destroy all buildings within a radius of several thousand square kilometers. People in the epicenter will have no chance of escaping, and the death toll could reach millions of people. Although the probability of the asteroid falling on a city or land in general is less than 25%. Apophis has much higher odds of falling into the ocean, but that doesn't mean that such a blow would kill fewer people. As the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson points out, if the epicenter of the impact happens to be located in the Pacific Ocean, a series of powerful tsunamis triggered by it will destroy the entire US West Coast. To this day, scientists can't tell for sure when Apophis will hit Earth and where exactly it'll fall. According to initial estimates, it was supposed to happen in 2029. Other potential dates were 2036 and 2068. At the time of Apophis's most recent flyby in March of 2021, a physicist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Marina Brozovic, managed to obtain more data using the 70-meter radio telescope Deep Space Network in California. At that moment, the asteroid was flying over 17 million kilometers away. Luckily, the observations revealed that none of the named Earth collision dates were confirmed. Scientists claim Apophis could crash into Earth within the next 500 years, so we have nothing to worry about for 100 years ahead. Still, astronomers have repeatedly moved the possible date of the catastrophe. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out for sure in 2029 when the asteroid will be at its closest to Earth, just 32,000 kilometers away. Although it's also possible that the next generation should watch out for threats not from space, but from the depths of the Earth itself. Our planet protects itself from space threats, both with its atmosphere and magnetic field. It's formed in Earth's outer core when currents move in molten iron. Thanks to the magnetic field, charged particles flowing in from the sun don't break up our atmosphere and so don't bombard the planet, destroying all life on it. But the problem is that this field is gradually weakening. Professor Nicholas Thuvity of the European Centre for Research and Teaching of Environmental Geosciences discovered that over the past 3,000 years, the magnetic field strength has decreased by 30%. And it's a pattern rather than an accident. The thing is, at different points in our planet's existence, its magnetic poles turned over from time to time. The plus and the minus change places. This is due to processes in the Earth's core. Over the past 20 million years, this has happened about 100 times. But before it turns over, the magnetic field weakens significantly. After that, it regains its strength slowly over thousands of years. Professor Thuvity believes Earth's magnetic field strength can reach a critical low as soon as in the following century. As for its consequences for humanity, we can already guess what they're going to be. We need to turn to the Atlantic Ocean between South America and Africa, where the South Atlantic anomaly exists. This is an area of an unnaturally weak magnetic field, 3 times weaker than at the poles. Besides, over the past 7 years of observations, it weakened even further by 6%. When satellites fly over this area, their sensors lag. If the magnetic field continues to weaken, we may run out of satellites by 2150. And then there'll be spectacular northern lights all over the planet, followed by outbreaks of diseases associated with radioactive solar radiation. But future generations will face not only catastrophes. At any moment, we could witness an incredible event, the explosion of Betelgeuse. This supergiant is in the Orion constellation, 640 light-years away from us. And at any moment, Betelgeuse could explode and become a supernova. Its demise has been predicted multiple times. In 2019, it suddenly got dimmer, following a titanic mass ejection. It was 400 billion times as powerful as similar ejections on our Sun. Back then, everyone was convinced that Betelgeuse would explode at any second, but it never did. Today, scientists are more cautious in their predictions. They say the supernova will explode within the next 100, 200, or 1 million years. Luckily, Betelgeuse is far enough away that its explosion is unlikely to affect life on Earth, but it'll be spectacular. The star will increase and look as big and bright as the moon in our sky. Moreover, it'll be visible both during the day and at night. When Betelgeuse explodes, our great-grandchildren or their kids will most likely be there to see it. But what awaits Earth after that? Actually, our planet will change beyond recognition in just a few thousand years. For example, the famous Niagara Falls will have disappeared by no later than the year 4000. Today, over 160,000 cubic meters of water pass through the waterfall's brink every minute. Such a powerful stream leads to stone erosion and causes landslides and rock falls. Over time, the sheer cliff from which the water falls into the lake will turn into a gentle slope, and the Niagara Falls system will simply cease to exist. But humanity's future is not entirely bleak. For example, in 20,000 years, the place of the world's most terrible nuclear disaster will become fully habitable again. I'm talking about Chernobyl. In 1986, an explosion occurred at the fourth power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It destroyed the reactor. The number of radioactive substances released into the environment was 300 times more than after the nuclear explosion in Hiroshima. More than 2,500 square kilometers have a life-threatening level of radiation. Scientists estimate that the zone will remain dangerous for another 20,000 years. But don't be mistaken. The exclusion zone is nothing like a realm of void and ominous silence. It's more like a nature reserve, actually. The zone is home to species that are rare in Ukraine, such as lynx and European bison. Besides, deforestation is prohibited near Chernobyl. It's likely that in 10 or 20,000 years, the exclusion zone will be one of the world's last pieces of virgin land. Indeed, humanity will set out to explore other planets by that time. And just then, the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 spacecraft, launched in 1977, will be close enough to the stars to examine them. In about 40,000 years, both spacecraft will reach stars for the first time since they left our solar system. Voyager 1 will pass just 1.6 light-years from the red dwarf Gliese 445 in the Giraffe constellation. This star emits 120 times less light than our Sun and is located 17.5 light-years from us. While from Earth it can only be seen through a telescope, Voyager 1 will get a very close view of it, and Voyager 2 will pass almost the same distance from another red dwarf, Ross 248. Ross 248 in the Andromeda constellation. It's just 14% of a solar mass. The star is 10 light-years away from us and is also invisible to the naked eye. Ross 248 is famous for its ability to spontaneously increase its brightness by flashing at certain intervals. But we can neither examine those flashes up close nor get the data about these stars from Voyager 2. NASA scientists expect both spacecraft to have run out of fuel by 2025. Then they'll no longer be able to send data to Earth. But even if they could, there might be no one here to receive it. We can't know for sure what will happen to humanity in 40,000 years. After all, even our Earth will change beyond recognition. Geologist João Duarte of the University of Lisbon is sure that in 200 million years, even land on Earth will look different. You see, the continents on our planet are not fixed and are constantly moving. About 200 million years ago, all land was part of a supercontinent called Pangaea, which eventually broke up into the continents we know today. Geologists believe we are currently somewhere in the middle of this cycle, and in the future the land will unite into a supercontinent again. Duarte cites an earthquake in Portugal in 1755 as proof of this theory. It was one of the most powerful of cataclysms which took the lives of 60,000 people and caused a tsunami that traveled all the way across the Atlantic. The problem is that the disaster shouldn't have happened in the first place. You see, earthquakes of this magnitude can only occur in so-called subduction zones. These are areas where the oceanic plate sinks under the continental one and collapses in red-hot magma, provoking powerful aftershocks. Near Portugal, the oceanic plate smoothly flows into the continental one. That's why powerful earthquakes are a rare occurrence on the Atlantic coast. Duarte concluded that the cataclysm was provoked by the rupture of the seam between the plates, and that's how geologists were able to predict 4 scenarios of the continent's direction and suppose how the land on Earth might look as a result. But it's not just our planet that will change over time. The solar system will look different too. In 2015, an article in Nature Geoscience predicted that in 20 million years, Mars is going to have rings. Scientists discovered that one of the planet's moons, Phobos, gets a few centimeters closer to Mars every year. What's going to happen is that the planet's gravity will just blow the moon into pieces and turn it into a ring in 40 days. Although, unlike Saturn, Mars will have very thin and almost invisible rings. From Earth, we'll only be able to observe their shadow on the surface of the red planet. And in 40 million years, fragments of Phobos will fall onto the surface of Mars. But it won't be the only planet to lose its rings. Scientists are convinced the same fate awaits Saturn in 100 million years. Its rings were first observed by Galileo in 1610. At that time, the astronomer couldn't examine them in detail and decided that these weren't rings but something like ears on the sides of the planet. These days, though, we know that a whole system of over 30 rings revolves around Saturn. They are around 300,000 kilometers wide, and according to some calculations, only a kilometer thick. Saturn's rings consist of particles of ice and rock ranging from a few micrometers to tens of meters in size. And the first data about the rings' gradual destruction were transmitted by the Voyagers in the early 80s. Flying around Saturn, the spacecraft recorded the so-called ring rain. The planet's powerful magnetic field attracts ice particles from the rings. When they pass through the atmosphere, they melt and fall out as rain. Interestingly, half an hour is enough for such rain to fill an Olympic-sized pool. The Cassini mission, which spent 13 years in the planet's orbit, proved the rings were doomed for good. Scientists analyzed the data from the probe to conclude that the rings will exist not for 30 million years, as the Voyager showed, but only 100. But the good news is that Saturn will pull into its orbit and crush many more asteroids, so the old rings will be replaced by new ones. A future full of change awaits not only planets, but their moons too. For example, our moon has been gradually moving away from Earth for billions of years. Matthias Zuck from the SETI Institute says that our satellite keeps doing this at a rate of 4 centimeters per year, and in 600 million years, the moon will no longer be able to cover the sun during eclipses. But we're going to feel the consequences of its distancing much earlier. You see, the moon affects not only the ebbs and flows on Earth. When it just formed, it was 16 times closer to the planet. Back then, Earth's spin was so fast that a day lasted only 5 hours instead of 24. But when the moon began to move away, Earth gradually slowed down, and if it continues to do so, the day on our planet will become longer and longer. Perhaps someday, the Earth might even come to a full stop. The half facing the sun will turn into a scorching hot desert, while the other side will be forever covered in ice. But if humanity survives to this point, its suffering isn't going to last long, because in 4 billion years the solar system will begin to die. Our sun is already on its way to becoming a red giant. Over time, the temperature of its core will rise, and the star itself will increase in size. It'll become so big that it'll devour Mercury, Venus, and Earth. And then, when its core runs out of fuel, it'll shrink into a white dwarf, eventually fading away. Although things might still be different, you see, when the sun expands, these outer planets may begin to change their orbits, move away from our star and collide with each other. And when the sun's mass decreases, they'll just fly apart and drift into outer space. By that time, a powerful solar wind will move away from the sun and form a bright planetary nebula. After a while, the nebula will also shrink into a white dwarf, which will then cool down and leave behind a dark stellar corpse the size of the Earth. In any case, the solar system may not live to see the most exciting galactic events. Just 1 billion years after the beginning of the sun's demise, our galaxy will merge with Andromeda. And even though they're still 2.5 million light-years away, the process of their merging has already started. In 2020, the Astrophysical Journal published a study that showed that the galaxy's halos are already touching. A halo is a dim cloud that envelops a galaxy and consists of gas, dust, and stars. Astronomers measured the size of Andromeda's galactic halo to discover that it stretches much farther than its visible borders, approximately approximately to 1.3 million light-years. What this means is that it already touches the Milky Way's halo. As of today, the galaxies are moving towards each other at a speed of about 110 kilometers per second. But the Milky Way and Andromeda will fully merge only when their supermassive black holes at their centers merge into one, with a total mass of billions of suns. During the collision, the stars in both galaxies will enter new orbits. This applies to our system as well, but we probably wouldn't be able to observe the merger from Earth, because by then the Sun will already have turned into a red giant and swallowed our planet. Too bad, because the collision of two galaxies will be the last bright event in our region of the universe, and in 100 billion years, it will begin to die. The universe is constantly expanding, and the distances between galaxies are getting longer. As the universe expands, more and more bright spots in the sky will grow dimmer or fade away completely. Moreover, stars can no longer form in the universe as they used to. The number of new young stars has decreased for the past 6 billion years. Scientists believe that as of today, 95% of all possible stars have already formed. That's because most of the elements necessary for the formation of celestial bodies have already been used up, and there isn't much hydrogen and helium left in the universe. At the same time, stars that formed billions of years ago begin to gradually dim and die. The biggest and brightest blue stars will explode and turn into supernovas one by one. Red giants will collapse into white dwarfs, and white dwarfs, cooling down, will turn into lifeless black pieces of matter. And as soon as in 1 trillion years, even background radiation will go out. This is microwave radiation that formed just 400 million years after the universe's birth. And if astronomers in one of the galaxies decides to look at the sky at that moment, they'll no longer see traces or evidence of the Big Bang in it. Another 100 trillion years will pass, and the universe itself will die. Because of its constant expansion and the death of stars, the temperature in the universe will gradually decrease until it drops to absolute zero. Galaxies will turn into dark spots filled with the remains of burnt stars and icy planets. Moreover, objects in space will be so far apart from each other that they'll lose their orbits and will only be able to wander aimlessly in dark, dead space. But there is another scenario. Some scientists believe that at some point, the universe will stop expanding. Then it'll begin to shrink back to the point of a singularity, after which a new Big Bang will occur and it all begins again. It's the year 100 trillion 13 billion 2023. These last few years may well go down in history as the dark times, the pandemic, natural disasters, wars. It feels like it's the largest number of catastrophes we've ever faced in the same period.